economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
In today's top stories, a new wave of explosions of Hezbollah transmission devices killed 20 people and injured more than 450 Wednesday across Lebanon, exacerbating fears of an all-out war with Israel, the occupying power. At the request of Lebanon, Algeria has called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council to examine the serious developments in Lebanon, particularly the explosions caused by large-scale cyber attacks. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a draft resolution submitted by the State of Palestine calling on the Zionist entity to end its illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territory within 12 months. Hello and welcome to Radio Algeria International. I'm Jamal Smani. As you followed in our top stories, at the request of Algeria, or at the request of Lebanon, Algeria has called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council to examine the serious developments in Lebanon, particularly the explosions caused by large-scale cyber attacks. Algeria's call comes after Lebanon was on Tuesday the scene of explosions caused by a cyber attack launched by the Zionist entity, resulting in the martyrdom and injury of civilians, an act described by the Lebanese government as a serious violation of Lebanese sovereignty and a fully fledged crime. The Lebanese Minister of Information, Ziad Makari, had indicated that the government immediately undertook all necessary contacts with the countries concerned and the United Nations to make them face up to their responsibilities in the face of this continuing crime. Let's note that a new wave of explosions of Hezbollah transmission devices killed 20 people and injured more than 450 Wednesday across Lebanon, exacerbating fears of an all-out war in the Zionist or with the Zionist entity. This new wave of attacks comes a day after a similar attack taking place following Israel's announcement that it was extending the objectives of the war against the Hamas movement in the Gaza Strip to its northern border with Lebanon. Now, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a draft resolution submitted by the State of Palestine calling on the Zionist entity to end its illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territory within 12 months. The text, which follows the opinion of the International Court of Justice in July on the Zionist occupation, was adopted by 124 votes to 14, with 43 abstentions. More details in this report.
The draft resolution debated since Tuesday by the 193 UN member states follows the opinion of the International Court of Justice (ICJ), which in July, examining the Zionist occupation since 1967 at the request of the General Assembly, ruled that the continued presence of the Zionist entity in the occupied Palestinian territory is illegal and that the occupier is under an obligation to put an end to it as soon as possible. The text also calls for a number of individual and collective measures to be taken to support the law and implement the relevant United Nations resolutions on the Palestinian question. The permanent representative of Palestine to the United Nations, Ambassador Riyad Mansour, quoted by the Palestinian news agency Wafa, said that the draft resolution reflected the advisory opinion of the ICJ issued last July at the request of General Assembly concerning the illegality of the Zionist presence in the occupied Palestinian territory. He added that the draft resolution was sponsored by 40 countries and was based on international law, stressing the need to respect the rule of law and the rights of the Palestinian people to access justice. Algeria, through its permanent representative to the UN Ambassador Ammar Benjama, has called for support for the historic draft resolution presented by the State of Palestine to the General Assembly to end the occupation and allow the Palestinian people to enjoy all their rights. The special session of the United Nations to vote on the Palestinian draft resolution comes just a few days before the arrival of dozens of heads of state and government in New York to take part in the opening of the annual session of the General Assembly.
The adoption on Wednesday by the UN General Assembly of the draft resolution presented by the State of Palestine demanding that the Israel and its occupation of the Palestinian territories within 12 months has been hailed by the Palestinians as a victory for the historic demands of the Palestinian people to end the occupation and establish an independent state, Mohammed Khater reports.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas welcomed the adoption of the Palestinian resolution by the UN General Assembly, underlining that the vote of two-thirds of the members of the General Assembly was evidence of an international consensus on the justness of the Palestinian cause and a victory for the inalienable right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of their independent state. For its part, the Palestinian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Expatriates welcomed the historic unanimity of the text, describing this vote as a decisive moment for the Palestinian cause and for international law. The Palestinian National Liberation Movement, Fatah, also welcomed the adoption of the draft resolution demanding that the Zionist entity, the occupying power, put an end to its illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territory following the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice on the legal consequences arising from the policies of the Zionist occupier in Palestine. In turn, the Palestinian resistance movement Hamas considered that the General Assembly's vote on the draft resolution submitted by Palestine was one of the most important achievements of Operation Deluge, of the Al-Aqsa Flood operation. The Hamas representative in Algeria, Youssef Hamdan, also praised the role of Algeria, which, thanks to its diplomacy, has contributed to achieving this goal.
The adoption by the UN General Assembly of a resolution calling on the Zionist entity to end the occupation of Palestinian land within 12 months has triggered a number of reactions worldwide. Mohammed Khatal again.
The Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, has welcomed the adoption by the UN General Assembly of a historic resolution confirming the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice, ICJ, regarding the illegality of the Zionist occupation of the Palestinian territories. The organization considered in a press release on Wednesday evening that this resolution expresses the international consensus on the justness of the Palestinian cause and its strong support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people, including their right to self-determination and the establishment of their independent and sovereign state on the borders of June 4, 1967, with East Al-Quds as its capital. The Secretary General of the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC, Jassim Al-Boudawi, for his part welcomed the adoption by the United Nations General Assembly of a resolution to end the illegal Zionist occupation of Palestine, reported the Wafa news agency. As for the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Policy and Security, Josep Borrell, he recognized the great importance of the adoption by the UN General Assembly of a resolution calling for an end to the Zionist occupation of Palestinian land within 12 months. As for the Secretary of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, Hussein El-Sheikh, he described as a victory for international justice the adoption on Wednesday by the UN General Assembly of a draft resolution submitted by the State of Palestine calling on the Zionist entity to end its occupation of Palestinian land within 12 months.
On the day 349 of the Israeli genocidal war against the defenseless population of the besieged Gaza Strip, a number of Palestinians were killed and others were injured with various wounds in the Zionist bombing of the central and southern Gaza Strip. Medical sources said that a number of citizens were killed in an occupation airstrike on Rafah city. The same sources added that 4 citizens were killed and others were injured after the Israeli occupation bombed a house belonging to Azzam family in Jabalia al-Balad, north of Gaza City. A number of citizens were injured, most of them children, when an occupation aircraft dropped a bomb on them in the new camp north of Nusayrat in the central Gaza Strip, while artillery shelling continues west of the camp. The occupation also continues to fire bullets in areas north of Bureij. The non-governmental organization Save the Children has said that the number of Palestinian children murdered in the occupied West Bank has more than doubled since October 2023 as the Zionist occupation army intensifies its attacks in the territory. More details with Saïd Bougazi.
According to a new Save the Children report, between 7th October and 14th August, 115 children were killed in the occupied territory, almost 3 times the number recorded during the previous 10 months, when 39 children were killed. In addition, at least 1,400 children were injured during the same period. The sharp increase in the killing of Palestinian children comes against the backdrop of an increase in attacks by Zionist forces and settlers in the occupied West Bank, which have left at least 705 Palestinians killed and around 5,700 wounded among Palestinians, notes the NGO. Save the Children said that the increase in violence in the West Bank was disrupting the flow of aid into the territory and hampered the movement of humanitarian personnel. On 11 September, the NGO had to cancel its operations in the Tulkarem camp due to the large-scale Zionist military incursions launched on 28 August in a large part of the northern West Bank. Jeremy Stoner, director of the humanitarian organization in the Middle East, said that the killing of Palestinian children was part of a trend that was eroding the safety, security, and fundamental rights of Palestinian children. Every day children are killed, injured, or seriously harmed, and their families mourn unimaginable losses. We must not allow violence against children to become the norm. We must act urgently to protect children in the West Bank, he added.
At least 11,000 students have been murdered and more than 17,700 injured since the start of the Israeli aggression against the Palestinian people on the 7th of October 2023, according to the Palestinian Ministry of Education and Higher Education. Saïd Bougazi again.
In the report published on Tuesday, the ministry said that 10,888 students were killed and 17,224 injured in the Gaza Strip alone, while in the occupied West Bank 113 students were killed and 548 injured. In addition, 429 students were arrested. The ministry also pointed out that 529 teachers and administrative staff were killed and 3,686 injured in Gaza and the West Bank, and 129 staff were arrested in the West Bank. The report also states that 362 public schools, universities, and university buildings, as well as 65 facilities run by the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, were bombed and damaged in Gaza. Of these, 124 were seriously damaged and 62 were completely destroyed. In the West Bank, 69 schools and 5 universities were attacked and vandalized. In addition, 133 public schools in Gaza were turned into shelters. The ministry pointed out that 718,000 students in the Gaza Strip are still unable to return to their schools and universities because of the genocidal aggression underway in the Palestinian enclave, with many students suffering psychological trauma and facing disastrous health conditions.
You're listening to Radio Algeria International. This is the English service. The Security Council has met to consider the situation in Sudan and was briefed by Assistant Secretary General for Africa in the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs and Peace Operations, Marta Ama Akyapobi, and Acting Under Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Msuya. Mohammed Khatil has more details.
The Assistant Secretary General told the Security Council that hundreds of thousands of people have been trapped in Al Fashir amid escalation of fighting in Sudan. Speaking during the meeting on behalf of the A3+ group, Algeria's permanent representative to the UN, Ammar Benjama, condemned the recent attacks by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces.
Despite the numerous calls made by this very council for de-escalation and the protection of civilians, we are once again appalled by the reports of attacks on Al Fashir. Attacks conducted by the Rapid Support Forces against the northern Darfur city and on the Abu Shouk and As-Salam displacement camps. We firmly condemn these attacks perpetrated by the RSF. Civilians in northern Darfur can no longer find a place to feel safe, to protect their children, to enjoy the fundamental right to a decent life.
Meanwhile, Mr. Benjama underlined the necessity to provide aid and assistance to all the civilians in Sudan, including in the region of Al-Fashir, and put an end to the support provided by third parties to the belligerents in Darfur.
We can no longer tolerate this violation of international law and international humanitarian law. We can no longer tolerate defiance of our resolutions, as illustrated by the RSF last attacks. We can no longer tolerate seeing civilians under siege while suffering malnutrition and unspeakable human rights violations. In this regard, we wish to underline the following points. First, there is a need to sustain the measures taken recently to facilitate humanitarian access to reach all affected civilians, including in Al-Fashir and its vicinity. Second, any approach to the protection of civilians must be comprehensive and fact-based. In this regard, we reiterate the need for coordination that preserves the central role of the United Nations. Third, protection of civilians also means putting an end to external interference and the support provided by external actors to the belligerent in Darfur.
It's worth recalling that civil war between the two major rival factions of the military government of Sudan and the Sudanese armed forces broke out on April 15, 2023.
The acting Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Msuya said that brutal war in Sudan has led to soaring hunger and blocked the delivery of life-saving aid, adding that the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, including in Al-Fashir, are at immediate threat.
Regardless, the essential factors for effectively addressing this grave situation will be a de-escalation in the fighting, as well as the willingness of the parties to facilitate safe access. Be in no doubt, without safe and predictable access and a steady supply of food and humanitarian supplies, we will see a dramatic spike in mortality, including children, in Zamzam and in other areas around Al-Fashir. The same goes for the situation across Sudan. Khartoum, Sennar, Aj Jazeera, and Aj Jazeera all continue to be devastated by relentless violence.
That was the acting Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator Joyce Msuya. Now back to Algeria. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has addressed a message of congratulations to the President of the Republic, Abdelmadjid Tebboune, on the occasion of his re-election for a second term of office, and said the UK and Algeria enjoy a relationship based on shared priorities, and he was looking forward to close cooperation in the future, given the potential of both countries. The President of the Federal Republic of Germany, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, has congratulated the President of the Republic, Mr. Tebboune, on the occasion of his re-election for a second term of office, wishing him every success in implementing the reform plan that he has undertaken to achieve the aspirations of the Algerian people. Now, the CEO of the National Energy Group, Sonatrach, Rashid Hashishi, has met in Houston in the United States of America with the president of the American company Chevron International Exploration and Production, Clay Neff, with whom he examined the possibilities of strengthening cooperation in the field of exploration and production. The meeting was held as part of the proceedings of the World Energy Conference, which is being held in Houston. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. Stay tuned.
A story in an artwork. A weekly program that tells